Welcome back to another deep dive. Today we're starting with a little mental exercise. So imagine you're standing in front of like a massive, immovable boulder.
Right. It's just a gigantic piece of rock blocking your path.
Exactly. And you need to get it out of the way, but all you have is your own two hands. You push, you strain, your muscles are totally burning, but the rock, I mean, it doesn't even budge.
Yeah, because it's a boulder. It's not going anywhere.
Right. But then imagine someone half your size just walks up.
Oh,
They aren't heavily muscled. They aren't sweating. They just slide a simple steel rod right under the rock, lean back with barely any effort, and pop.
wow.
Yeah, the boulder just rolls away. And that right there is the absolute dividing line between raw, exhausting physical strength and refined, calculated technique.
It's a perfect visual because it completely upends how we're, biologically wired to view conflict.
It really does.
Yeah.
So today's deep dive is all about that fascinating reality. The topic is raw physical strength versus refined technique.
And we have some incredible sources to pull from today. We're exploring a seriously chaotic viral YouTube transcript from the channel Orin, along with a great blog post from the Self-Defense Academy, COS.
Yeah, and the mission here is to uncover exactly how a smaller, weaker person can completely neutralize a much larger attacker.
Right, and to extract those foundational principles of leverage so you, the listener, can apply them to your own understanding of power and efficiency.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this viral encounter is just the perfect case study in ego meeting physics.
Oh, it really is.
We have this weightlifting influencer. He is huge. Like,
Yeah.
he loudly boasts about a 200-pound bench press, and he just struts onto this jujitsu mat.
Totally operating under the assumption that gym strength translates one-to-one into fighting dominance.
Exactly. He thinks he's the boulder,
Yeah.
and everyone else is just going to bounce right off him.
What's fascinating here is you can actually see the visual calculus happening in his head.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, he scans the room, looks at the smaller students, particularly a female student who is significantly lighter than him, and he just calculates zero threat.
None at all.
Right. He dismisses her entirely based purely on her visual footprint.
And he's incredibly vocal about it, too. Like, the transcript of this video captures him throwing around these just painfully arrogant taunts.
They're pretty bad.
Yeah, he tells her, quote, "You fight worse than a girl," and mocks her by asking if she wants to do his dishes.
Which is just wild to say in a martial arts gym.
I know. Someone off camera even warns him, saying, like, you can't handle her, but he just laughs it off entirely.
Because he's so insulated by his own muscle mass that he literally cannot perceive a reality where he loses.
Which, of course, sets the stage for a spectacular psychological and physical collapse.
Oh yeah, the climax of the video is pure chaos. Over the garbled audio of the gym, you suddenly hear someone shouting, "Oh, Jordan, he's asleep, he's asleep! Roll him over, roll him over!"
It's crazy. This massive bodybuilder was literally choked unconscious by the much smaller female student.
Out cold, just completely asleep.
All right. I have to stop you right here, though, because this is where the math kind of stops making sense to me.
Okay, lay it on me.
I need to push back on this premise. Like, shouldn't sheer muscle mass count for something?
Yeah.
If I'm, say, 130 pounds and the 200-pound man drops his entire dead weight onto my chest, I don't care how good my technique is. My
Yeah.
ribs are going to crack. I won't be able to inflate my lungs. Gravity's a law of nature, so how does technique magically make 200 pounds of weight just disappear?
That is exactly the right thing to question, because it reveals the biggest misunderstanding about martial arts. You're absolutely right. You can't ignore gravity.
Right.
And technique does not make weight magically disappear. But what technique does do is it redirects it.
Redirects it.
Yeah, it changes how that weight interacts with your anatomy. It's all about structural framing. When a 200-pound man is on top of a trained practitioner, the smaller person isn't using their chest muscles or arm muscles to push that weight off.
Because if they do, they just exhaust themselves in 30 seconds. Right?
Exactly. They'd be crushed.
So what are they using then?
Their bones. They align their skeletal structure, their forearms, shins, knees, to create physical pillars between themselves and the heavier person.
Oh, wow.
Think about a house holding up a heavy roof. The house doesn't use, strength to hold the roof upright.
Right. It uses vertical load-bearing beams.
Exactly. A smaller person creates load-bearing frames with their bones. So the giant bodybuilder isn't resting his 200 pounds on her lungs.
He's resting it on the rigid frame of her skeletal system.
Bingo. Which redirects the weight straight into the floor.
That is so cool. Okay, so she essentially turns herself into a piece of architecture.
She really does.
But surviving the weight is one thing. How does she actually put him to sleep?
Hmm.
I mean, if she grabs his neck, he could easily just pull her hands away, right?
Yeah.
His biceps are probably the size of her head.
Right, and this is where the biomechanics become truly fascinating. She doesn't use her hands to choke him.
She doesn't.
Nope. She uses a move called a triangle choke, which actually wraps her legs around his neck. Yeah. The human legs and hips contain the largest, most powerful muscle groups in the entire body. The neck, on the other hand, is structurally vulnerable.
So she's pitting the absolute strongest part of her body against the weakest part of his.
Exactly.
So she isn't even fighting his massive arms at all. She just bypassed his weapons entirely.
Precisely. And even more brilliantly, a triangle choke uses the opponent's own anatomy against them. She traps one of his arms inside her leg grip.
Okay, wait, what does that do?
It means that as she squeezes her legs, she is actually driving the bodybuilder's own massive shoulder muscle directly into his carotid artery.
Wait, really? So his own muscle mass is literally being used to cut off the blood flow to his brain?
That is exactly what's happening. And there's a huge difference between an air choke, which crushes the windpipe and requires immense strength, and a blood choke.
Because of the pressure required.
Yeah, compressing the carotid arteries only takes a few pounds of pressure. It cuts off the oxygen to the brain in about 8 to 10 seconds. And the bodybuilder was flexing, raging, burning up oxygen way faster because of his massive muscles.
So he basically accelerated his own downfall.
Exactly. He wasn't beaten by strength. He was dismantled by anatomical engineering.
It's like watching someone try to forcefully rip a heavy, solid oak door off a wall by pulling right at the hinges.
Right.
Like, it doesn't matter how strong you are, the physics are just against you.
Mm.
But if you just walk to the other side and push the handle, a child can swing that heavy door wide open.
That's a perfect analogy.
She understood where the handle was, and he was just yanking on the hinges.
Beautifully put. And this specific understanding of bodily levers isn't actually new. To really grasp how she did this, we have to trace the blueprint back to a man named Jigoro Kano.
Jigoro Kano. Okay.
Right, in the late 19th century. Kano was the founder of Judo, and he completely revolutionized martial arts by moving away from brute force.
So he was the one who figured out the physics.
Yeah, his entire martial philosophy rested on one defining concept: maximum efficiency, minimum effort.
Which, sounds great on paper, but how did he actually discover this? Was he just in a lab experimenting with human geometry?
Essentially, yes. Kano realized that meeting force with reciprocal force is just a statistical gamble. If a 200-pound man pushes a 150-pound man, and the smaller man pushes back...
The larger mass is going to win 100% of the time.
Exactly. So Kano deduced that instead of pushing back, the smaller person should yield to the push, pull the attacker forward to destroy their balance.
Oh, because once an opponent is off balance, their size actually becomes a massive liability.
Yes. They have more weight pulling them down to the floor. It's all about mapping the human body's center of gravity.
So he created a system of throws and sweeps that basically weaponized the attacker's own momentum.
He did, but the sources also point out another crucial historical figure who took this concept even further.
Right, Helio Gracie.
Yeah, and Helio's story is really the missing link that explains the viral video. If Kano laid the foundation of maximum efficiency, Helio Gracie stress-tested it for the absolute weakest among us.
Because Helio adapted Kano's ideas into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or Jujutsu, right?
Exactly. And he did this out of pure necessity. Helio was physically frail. He was much smaller and weaker than his brothers and peers.
So he couldn't rely on speed, and he definitely didn't have the explosive strength required to execute some of the standing judo throws against larger men.
Right. He had to figure out a different way.
So what did he do? If you can't throw a giant, how do you beat him?
You take him to the ground. Helio realized that the floor is the great equalizer.
The floor.
Yeah, think about it. When you're standing up, a massive person can use their legs to generate immense explosive power.
Right, they can drive forward.
But when you're lying flat on the ground, that ability to generate kinetic energy just vanishes. You remove the floor as a platform for momentum.
Oh, wow.
So Helio engineered an entire system of ground fighting where leverage, grips, and precise angles replace lifting and pushing.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because that completely reframes what we saw in the YouTube video.
It really does.
When that influencer was trapped on the mat, flexing and screaming, He was like a high-powered sports car stuck in a muddy ditch.
Well, that's good.
The engine is roaring, the RPMs are maxed out, but the tires can't grip anything. All that horsepower is entirely useless, and he's just drowning in his own exhaust.
Exactly. The female student wasn't just a talented fighter, she was applying a century of refined physical technology to a modern-day meathead.
She was the direct, living legacy of Helio Gracie's adaptations. She had the blueprint.
And that blueprint was specifically designed so that a deeply disadvantaged person could survive. The mats just don't lie. When an opponent is a master of leverage, every ounce of muscle you try to use against them simply becomes an anchor that pulls you down faster.
Now, obviously, watching an arrogant influencer get humbled on the internet is highly entertaining.
It's peak instant karma, for sure.
It really is. But for you, the listener, we have to look at the practical application. Like, you probably aren't trying to win internet fights against bodybuilders.
Probably not.
You just want to feel secure in your daily life. And that brings us to the second half of our deep dive. The real value of this physics isn't in viral videos. It's in how these principles are taught to everyday people today.
Which perfectly shifts our focus from the ego-driven chaos of that gym to a completely different environment.
Right, the Self-Defense Academy, COS.
Yeah, down in downtown Colorado Springs. This academy is run by Professor Flip Aguilar and his wife, and it provides such a profound contrast to that viral video.
They teach the Valente brothers method, right?
They do.
Yeah.
But what really anchors their approach is their strict adherence to something called the 753 code.
Right, and we definitely need to clarify what that actually means because, honestly, it sounds a bit like a secret agent protocol.
It does sound intense, but the 753 code is actually a holistic framework that goes way beyond just choking someone out.
It's about character, right?
Yeah, it refers to 7 virtues of a warrior, things like honor and courage, 5 keys to a healthy lifestyle, and 3 vital states of mind. It integrates morality, physical health, and mental awareness into one cohesive system.
Which is the exact opposite of the influencer's mindset.
Precisely. The influencer sought out conflict just to prove his superiority. The 753 code built a mindset focused on awareness, de-escalation, and preservation.
And the Academy operates under this very specific, powerful slogan, "You are worth defending."
It's a great slogan.
I love it so much because it completely shifts the paradigm of self-defense. It takes the focus away from, how do I destroy an attacker and re-centers it entirely on self-worth.
Right.
You are protecting an asset yourself.
Yeah.
And when you look at the demographic of who is walking through their doors, it is just mind-blowing.
It really is. We aren't talking about aspiring cage fighters here.
Not at all.
If you synthesize the feedback from their community, this striking pattern emerges. You have all these parents leaving 5-star reviews about their very young children.
Yeah, multiple accounts of kids as young as 4 and 7 years old taking classes.
Right. They're learning physical coordination, sure, but they are also developing deep character strength and focus.
Let's really think about that for a second. The exact same anatomical hacks, the skeletal framing, the leverage that can neutralize a 200-pound aggressive bodybuilder, are so fundamentally rooted in basic physics that a 4-year-old toddler can grasp them.
It's incredible.
The Academy is teaching maximum efficiency to preschoolers.
Which absolutely proves Helio Gracie's original hypothesis, right? The system requires 0 prerequisite strength. It is universally accessible.
Yeah.
And this isn't just about physical survival, it is about mental resilience. One reviewer accurately described the Academy as offering a holistic approach to self-defense and to life.
Because when you learn how to navigate physical pressure without panicking, you start navigating mental and emotional pressure the exact same way.
Exactly. And the Academy actually takes the intimidation factor completely out of the learning process through these incredibly creative outreach programs.
Oh, like the sushi and self-defense classes?
Yes. You show up, you learn how to establish a physical frame to keep a larger person away from you, and then you learn how to roll a spicy tuna roll.
I mean, that is just brilliant. It's such a great pedagogical strategy.
Right. By pairing self-defense with something as lighthearted as a sushi-making class, they lower the barrier to entry. They demystify the martial art.
And it works. The reviews specifically highlight women who self-identify as completely non-athletic, like Angela Gregorio, who noted she isn't athletic but absolutely loved it.
And Chloe Nicole had a similar positive experience.
Yeah, they walk in nervous and walk out feeling empowered. You don't need a background in gymnastics or weightlifting. The academy meets you exactly at your baseline of ability.
And we see that adaptability in their community partnerships as well. They've conducted programs with the Women's Bean Project, providing life-saving techniques to women from deeply vulnerable backgrounds.
That's amazing.
And they have also hosted introductory classes for seniors through an organization called Silver Key.
Wow, seniors doing jujitsu.
Yeah. The attendees noted how Professor Flip specifically tailored the instruction to accommodate their physical limitations.
He's essentially teaching the elderly how to maintain balance and avoid falling by using Kano's exact century-old mapping of the human center of gravity.
Exactly. It's the same physics, just applied to the obstacle of aging instead of an attacker.
Which really brings us to the core synthesis of this deep dive.
It does. A reviewer named Nicholas Cessna captured the true gift of this martial art perfectly. He said it isn't about collecting belts or winning trophies.
Right.
It's the combination of mental awareness, the ability to spot a threat before it escalates, and the physical tricks that ensure easy maneuverability.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Like, do you need to run out right now, buy, that traditional heavy cotton uniform and dedicate the next 10 years to getting a black belt just to feel safe in the world?
Not necessarily. The tactical knowledge is invaluable, of course, but the deeper takeaway is the adoption of the mindset itself.
The mindset of leverage.
Right. It's about understanding that you don't need to be the biggest person in the room to control your environment. When you truly grasp that leverage beats lifting and that angles beat aggression, the world becomes a significantly less intimidating place.
You stop looking at massive obstacles as immovable boulders, and you start looking for the handle on the door.
Exactly.
You realize that a smaller person using maximum efficiency will dismantle brute strength every single time.
That arrogant influencer found that out the hard way, lying unconscious on a mat because he thought physics didn't apply to his biceps.
He fundamentally misunderstood power.
He really did. As the Academy's blog beautifully articulates, physical strength can certainly be an asset, but refined technique will always have the final word.
Yeah. Chigoro Kano conceptualized it, Helio Gracie perfected it for the underdog, and now everyday people from 4-year-olds to grandmothers in Colorado Springs are using it to reclaim their sense of safety.
It's about fundamentally changing your posture toward conflict.
Which leads us to a pretty profound quote, featured as the thought of the moment on the Academy's blog.
Oh, the Gandhi quote.
Yeah. It isn't from a fighter, but from Mahatma Gandhi. He said, "Strength does not come from physical capacity. It comes from an indomitable will."
An indomitable will. It is the will to remain calm under crushing pressure.
Right.
The will to trust the technique rather than panicking and flailing around, and the discipline to look for the angle of maximum efficiency rather than defaulting to minimum thought and maximum effort.
Which raises an important question. Oh, wait, that's your catchphrase. Go ahead.
Haha. Well, this raises an important question, and this is what we really want you to mull over as you go about your week.
Yeah, think about this one.
We have spent this deep dive exploring how the mechanical concepts of leverage can allow a smaller person to topple a giant in a physical fight.
Right.
But how could you apply this exact same concept of leverage over brute force to the biggest, most exhausting non-physical obstacles you are wrestling with in your own career or personal life right now?
Wow. Yeah, like in your career, in your personal relationships, in your creative projects, where are you currently acting like that influencer?
Right, where you're just roaring the engine, spinning your tires, and trying to shove a boulder with your bare hands.
When you should really be stepping back,
Yep.
assessing the geometry of the problem and, looking for a crowbar.
Exactly.
Stop exhausting yourself against the immovable objects in your life and start looking for the angles.
Perfectly said.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, remember that you are worth defending, and sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to stop pushing and start pivoting. Picture the U.S. military operating in a highly volatile, really close-quarters environment, like Iraq, for example.
Extremely high stress.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you are talking about an organization that possesses the most overwhelming, technologically sophisticated firepower on the planet.
Yeah, without a doubt.
But behind closed doors, commanders were issuing these directives and intentionally seeking out training for their troops on how not to use those weapons.
Which is wild to think about.
Right. They were looking for a way to engage in physical conflict without striking, without shooting, and, without destroying the person in front of them.
It sounds completely counterintuitive to everything we assume about Military combat, I mean, right?
Oh, totally.
We condition ourselves to view conflict, especially martial conflict, through this lens of maximum impact. Like, you neutralize a threat by hitting it harder than it can hit you.
Yeah, the old overwhelming force idea.
Yeah. Exactly. Yet the source materials we are examining today, they reveal this really profound shift away from that destructive model. It focuses entirely on leverage, yielding, and preservation.
And that shift is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive. We have a really fascinating stack of sources in front of us today.
They really do.
We were looking at a transcript of a news report by NBC6's Tom Lamas, and he's covering this very specific U.S. Army training session down in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
And we are pairing that with a highly detailed blog post, plus a vast collection of community reviews from a facility called the Self-Defense Academy, COS, out in Colorado Springs.
So we're kind of spanning the whole spectrum here.
We are. Our mission today is to explore how the core principles of a specific martial art are completely transforming high-stakes professions,
Yeah.
like the military and law enforcement,
Right.
and then seeing how that trickles all the way down into everyday community building.
Yeah, and to set the table for you listening, the connective tissue between these sources is the application of Jujutsu, or Jujutsu principles.
Right. Okay, let's get into that terminology a bit.
Sure. So our sources use a few terms interchangeably. You'll hear Jujutsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and the Valente Gracie method.
Mm-hmm.
But the overarching concept to keep in mind here is that Jiu-Jitsu translates roughly to the soft art, or the yielding art.
Which sounds like an oxymoron when you're talking about the Army.
It really does. But it's a methodology built entirely on manipulating an opponent's skeletal structure and their center of gravity rather than relying on blunt force trauma.
I want to say right up front to everyone listening, even if you aren't a soldier and you aren't a police officer, this analysis is going to seriously challenge your everyday assumptions about conflict resolution.
Oh, absolutely.
Because this is fundamentally about how the human brain and body manage high-stress situations gracefully.
Yeah, grace under pressure.
Exactly. So let's start at the extreme end of the spectrum with a military application, because this NBC6 report really sets the stage.
It's a great starting point.
So the Department of Defense was sending out orders for more self-defense training for troops who were rotating in and out of Iraq.
Right.
And we have these U.S. soldiers based in Hollywood, Florida, rolling down into North Miami Beach to get a crash course at the Valente Gracie Jiu-Jitsu School.
And context is really crucial here, I think. The U.S. Army had originally incorporated aspects of jiu-jitsu into their broader combative program about 12 years prior to this report.
Okay, so it wasn't totally brand new.
Right, not totally new, but the tactical realities on the ground were shifting. The Department of Defense realized there was a major gap in the soldiers' close quarters toolkit.
Ah.
They needed troops to urgently brush up on these specific non-lethal skills before deploying.
I do have to push back on the logistics described in this report, though.
How so?
Well, it says over the course of just 3 hours, these soldiers were learning sucker punch defenses, basic takedowns, and how to physically mount and control an opponent.
Yeah, 3 hours is fast.
Right. How on earth does a 3-hour crash course in Miami meaningfully prepare a soldier for a super unpredictable insurgency in the Middle East? It feels like trying to teach someone a foreign language on the flight over.
It is a compressed timeline, undeniably. I mean, you can't argue with that.
Yeah.
But the objective of that 3-hour session wasn't to produce black belts.
Okay, fair enough.
The objective was to fundamentally rewire the soldier's initial physical response to a threat. The news report lays out the tactical reality pretty clearly. U.S. troops in Iraq were frequently walking side by side with civilians.
Just blending in.
Blending in with potential insurgents, too. So, in a crowded marketplace, if someone lunges at a soldier or grabs their gear, a machine gun is a catastrophic tool for restraint.
Oh, the collateral damage would just be unthinkable.
Exactly. And the source specifically mentions the overarching military directive was to win the hearts and minds of Iraqis.
Right, and you cannot win trust if your only response to a close-quarter shove or a grab is lethal force.
You just can't. What that 3-hour training provided was a mechanical alternative.
A mechanical alternative. I like that.
Yeah, the source material emphasizes that this specific style of training is based entirely on leverage and technique, rather than strikes and kicks.
So it's not about punching your way out.
No, not at all. If a soldier understands the basic mechanics of how to manipulate an attacker's wrist, or, how to shift their own hips to throw an attacker off balance,
then they suddenly have a reliable, non-lethal option to subdue a threat.
Exactly.
It's kind of like the difference between trying to break down a locked door with a sledgehammer versus just knowing how to pick the lock.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. Like, one requires maximum destructive force and leaves a massive mess. The other just requires an understanding of the internal mechanics, leverage over strikes. You are basically just picking the lock of the human skeletal system.
That is an incredibly apt way to visualize it. And as a quick reminder to you listening, when we analyze these military directives, or as we'll get into shortly, police use of force.
We are strictly looking at the data, the mechanics, and the claims presented in our sources.
Yes, exactly. We're taking no political stance here. We are impartially mapping out the logic detailed in these texts.
Right, we're just reading what the sources say. And the logic of that military training actually provides a flawless transition to the domestic front.
It really does.
Because if a non-lethal leverage-based method works in the intense, hyper-unpredictable environment of a foreign combat zone, it completely changes how we should look at domestic law enforcement.
Absolutely. Especially since police-community relations are constantly evolving and, highly scrutinized.
And they rely so heavily on the concept of proportional force.
Which brings us to the blog post from the Self-Defense Academy, COS, out in Colorado Springs.
Yes, the Colorado Springs source.
They delve really deeply into the methodology of the Valente brothers, which, remember, are the same instructors behind that Miami military training.
Right, the through line.
And their entire philosophy hinges on one defining phrase: control without injury.
Control without injury. So the goal stops being about defeating or punishing an opponent, and it shifts entirely to just neutralizing the threat safely.
Exactly. And the blog provides a really compelling case study to back up how this actually works on the streets.
The Marietta one, right?
Yes. They look at the police department in Marietta, Georgia. They launched this mandatory program teaching their officers jujitsu specifically to handle physical confrontations.
And the outcomes they tracked were pretty staggering.
They really were.
By mandating this training, they saw a significant reduction in the overall use of force. They documented fewer injuries to the suspects being apprehended and simultaneously fewer injuries to the officers themselves.
Which is a huge win-win.
Totally. And furthermore, officers who completed this training were remarkably less likely to resort to using their firearms, tasers, or aggressive striking restraints.
Okay, let's unpack the mechanics of that for a second, because on the surface, it sounds like a paradox.
It really does. By taking police officers and explicitly teaching them how to physically engage in a fight, it actually results in them fighting less.
Right.
How does knowing how to execute a takedown result in a lower use of force? That doesn't make intuitive sense.
To understand the why behind the Marietta data, you have to look at the biology of panic, which the blog touches on.
Okay, the biology of panic. Let's hear it.
When a human being feels physically outmatched or out of control, the brain's amygdala basically hijacks the nervous system.
Fight or flight mode.
Exactly. The heart rate spikes to like 180 beats per minute, tunnel vision sets in, and fear just takes over completely.
Wow.
And fear is the primary driver of volatile, aggressive escalation. If an officer's only tools are a gun, a baton, and their own brute strength, any physical resistance is going to trigger that massive adrenaline dump.
So they panic.
Yeah. They will reach for a weapon to equalize the situation because they feel outmatched.
Because they feel like their life is instantly in danger if they lose their footing.
Precisely. But the blog details a profound psychological shift in the officers who learned jujitsu.
They felt different out there.
They reported feeling significantly more confident and composed in high-stress situations. When an officer knows through hundreds of hours of practice that they have the technical leverage to safely pin someone twice their size without throwing a single punch, their fear response just plummets.
That is fascinating.
Composure replaces panic. You do not need to strike out of fear when you know you can control the environment out of competence.
You don't strike out of fear if you can control out of competence. Man, that is a massive paradigm shift.
It really is.
It means de-escalation isn't just about using a calm tone of voice, you know. It's an actual physical state of being.
Exactly. It starts in the body.
And the sources point out that the ripple effects of this physiological shift extend far beyond just the immediate altercation on the street. It fundamentally alters the economics of a city.
Oh, the hidden dividends are immense. The blog dives into how control without injury transforms municipal budgets.
Yeah, talk about the budget side.
Well, fewer physical injuries during confrontations directly translate to lower healthcare costs and medical bills for the municipalities.
Which saves taxpayer money.
Right. And it means fewer lost work days for officers who would otherwise be, recovering from torn ligaments or broken hands.
And crucially, it leads to a massive reduction in lawsuits and legal settlements stemming from excessive force complaints.
That's a huge one.
If you go back to the sledgehammer analogy, when you use the sledgehammer, people get broken and the city pays millions in settlements. When you pick the lock using leverage, everyone walks away intact.
That's spot on. We also cannot overlook the mental health benefits outlined in the text. Law enforcement carries an immense chronic psychological toll.
Oh, definitely. The stress must be off the charts.
It is. The physical practice of jiu-jitsu offers intense stress relief and better cardiovascular conditioning. The blog argues this directly mitigates officer burnout and reduces sick days.
Which are notoriously difficult and expensive issues for any department to manage. But, the section of the blog that really stopped me in my tracks was the proposal for community integration.
Wow, the mat time.
Yes, they advocate for regular shared mat time between the Colorado Springs police officers and local citizens. The idea is that on the training mat, everyone is completely equal.
The sociology of that proposal is just brilliant.
It's the ultimate equalizer.
Mm-hmm.
The blog suggests that you step onto the mat, you take off your street clothes, you take off your police uniform, your badge, your gun belt, whatever status symbols you carry in the outside world.
Right, you leave it all in the locker room.
Yeah. And you put on a gi. And for those listening who might not know, a gi is that heavy, woven cotton uniform traditionally worn in martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
When everyone is wearing a gi, sweating, and trying to figure out the physics of a joint lock, rank and title just vanish. You are just two human beings trying not to get tangled up.
Think about the psychological barrier that breaks down there.
It's got to be massive.
It is. When a local community member and an on-duty officer are practicing yielding and leverage together, learning from one another's mistakes, it forces mutual vulnerability.
Yeah, you have to be vulnerable to learn it.
And it builds a foundation of respect that a traditional town hall meeting simply cannot replicate.
A town hall meeting is just people yelling at microphones.
Exactly. The blog emphasizes that this shared mat time signals to the public that police are actively committed to protecting and serving rather than dominating or instilling fear.
Wow.
The training mat literally becomes a bridge between two groups that often view each other with a lot of suspicion.
The mat as a bridge. I love that. So we've mapped out how this control without injury philosophy scales up to military battalions in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen how it rewires the psychology and budgets of domestic police departments.
Right.
But here is where the sources get incredibly relatable for you, the listener.
Let's bring it home.
Exactly. How does a methodology designed for life or death combat scale down to an everyday civilian?
To answer that, we turn to the culture being cultivated at the Self-Defense Academy, COS, in Colorado Springs.
Yes. The head instructor there is Flip Aguilar.
Mm-hmm. Fliss.
And our sources specifically note that he holds a Fighting Foundation certificate from the Valente brothers.
Which is key because that ties his curriculum directly back to the exact same methodology used by those soldiers down in Miami.
The exact same stuff. And we have access to 42 five-star reviews from everyday people taking his classes. Reading through them provides a really fascinating window into how these concepts translate to daily life.
The reviews paint a vivid picture of transformation that goes far, far beyond just physical fitness.
They really do.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a review from Hannah who talks about her 5-year-old and 7-year-old kids gaining not just coordination, but actual tangible character strength.
That's great for kids.
Yeah. And you have corporate teams coming in to use the academy for bonding events. And then, honestly, my absolute favorite detail in this entire stack of sources, the sushi and self-defense classes.
It feels like a total contradiction on the surface.
It's wonderfully quirky. We have reviews from students like Chloe and Angela who are just raving about this specific event.
What did Angela say specifically?
Well, Angela explicitly mentions she isn't a particularly athletic person, but she highly recommends this class where you spend time learning leverage-based self-defense and then, immediately after you learn how to make sushi rolls.
That is amazing.
I just marveled at the contrast. Think about the through line here. The exact same Valente brothers mechanics of leverage and physical composure that were used by U.S. troops to safely subdue insurgents in Baghdad
Right.
are being taught to a mom in Colorado Springs right before she learns to roll spicy tuna.
It is a striking juxtaposition. But, the reason it works in both of those environments is because the physiological response to stress is universal.
The biology is the same.
Exactly. The same neurological adrenaline dump, that cortisol spike you experience when a stranger approaches you aggressively in a parking lot.
Yeah.
That is the exact same chemical reaction you experience during a highly contentious meeting in a corporate boardroom.
Wow, really?
Yes, your brain just registers a threat. It doesn't know the difference between a physical attack and a social one.
And the Academy provides a framework for managing that threat, which brings us to the underlying philosophy mentioned in the reviews. It's called the 753 Code.
Ah, yes, the 753 code.
Several students mention how this code literally changed their lives.
The 753 code is critical to understanding the source material. It proves this isn't just a collection of physical tricks or, chokeholds.
That's not just a gym.
Right. The blog unpacks the 753 code as the Academy's core behavioral framework. It translates the physical practice of yielding and leverage on the mat into a mental operating system for everyday life.
A mental operating system.
Yeah, it focuses on cultivating virtues like courage, humility, emotional regulation, and physical health.
So it's essentially taking the physical concept of composure under pressure and turning it into a daily habit.
Exactly.
As one reviewer, Christina, put it, incorporating this philosophy into her life improved her courage and confidence tenfold.
That's a huge endorsement.
And for you listening, this means you don't need to be preparing for a physical brawl to benefit from this training. When you deeply understand leverage and balance and you know how to protect your own boundaries, you no longer have to operate from a place of chronic anxiety.
Because you're prepared.
Right. You move through the world differently.
You carry that composure with you everywhere. You realize that you don't have to meet every aggressive force with equal or greater aggression.
You can just step aside.
You can yield, you can pivot, and you can let the opposing force unbalance itself.
So let's take a step back and look at the incredible journey these sources just took us on today.
It's been quite a ride.
We started in the high-stakes, life-or-death environment of military combat, looking at soldiers forced to learn leverage instead of relying on firearms so they could, win hearts and minds.
Mm-hmm.
And then we followed that logic to domestic police departments, discovering the paradox that teaching officers how to systematically control a physical altercation actually led to them fighting less.
Panicking less, too.
Yes, panicking less and saving their cities millions of dollars in the process. And finally, we brought it all the way home to community trust, character building for kids, and local sushi classes in Colorado.
The unifying thread through every single one of these scenarios is the conscious decision to prioritize leverage and control over strikes and aggression.
Which is so powerful.
It is the profound realization that neutralizing a threat does not require destroying the person in front of you.
And as we wrap up today's deep dive, I really want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
What's the thought?
Tucked all the way at the very bottom of the Self-Defense Academy blog post was this quiet, anonymous quote simply labeled, "Thought of the moment."
Oh, I saw that.
It reads, "There's risk in getting feedback, but only if you need to be right. If you're more interested in getting it right, then you'll regularly seek feedback as a forcing function to produce and transform your thinking."
It is such a profound statement on vulnerability, and it mirrors exactly what happens on the training mat. Well, when you are practicing jujitsu, you are constantly receiving immediate, undeniable physical feedback. You try to force a move using brute strength, it doesn't work, your balance is compromised, and you get put in a hold.
You get tapped out.
You have to physically tap out. You have to admit your approach was wrong in order to learn how to lockpick the joint correctly.
You had to submit to the feedback. And it made me think,
Yeah.
how does that physical vulnerability required to learn on the mat parallel our intellectual vulnerability in everyday life?
That's a great question.
Think about all the conflict we navigate daily. The tense arguments with our partners, the defensive posturing at work, the endless, exhausting, zero-sum debates online.
Oh, the online debates are the worst. We often treat those intellectual arguments like a physical brawl.
We really do.
You try to throw the knockout punch to win the debate and just humiliate the other side.
Exactly. What if we applied this idea of control without injury to our words and our thoughts?
That would change everything.
Next time you find yourself in a heated argument, online or in person, ask yourself, are you trying to throw a sledgehammer at this person's ego just to prove that you are right?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you looking for the intellectual leverage to actually resolve the conflict so you can get it right together?
It suggests that true strength, whether you are dealing with a physical threat or an ideological disagreement, isn't measured by how hard you can strike.
No, it's not.
It is measured by how well you can maintain your balance, absorb feedback, and guide the situation to a safe resolution.
So the next time you feel your heart rate spike and you feel that overwhelming urge to throw that metaphorical roundhouse kick in a conversation.
Just breathe.
Yeah. Remember the soldiers in Miami learning to put away their weapons. Remember the lockpicking. Sometimes the most powerful transformative move you can make is choosing not to strike at all.